So today my student Boris cancelled, and it means that I've got some time for a lesson. So I appreciate being able to do this. I mean, being able to replace unreliable students with this class. It's excellent. It means I don't lose the money when I lose students or when students cancel at the last minute. So I really appreciate it. Okay, the first ones, we stopped on lesson feedback 30, and so we're up to lash out at and to hit out at, very often in revenge or in reaction to somebody's attack. Somebody comes at you first and then you lash out at them or hit out at them, or somebody criticises you and you lash out at your critics, you hit out at your critics. So it's very often tit for tat. It's very often in return, in reaction to what somebody has done to you, or some kind of attack on your character or physical attack on your person, on your body. So it can be used, both of these can be used metaphorically or physically. They're both possible in both ways. You can lash out at critics, hit out at critics, and lash out at a person, at an attacker, and hit out at an assailant. So I think you're well aware of those two, and they're good ones. They're well worth remembering. Okay, if you draw something out, you make something last much longer than usual. So I gave you a good example here because I got another phrasal verb in there. Josh's meetings tend to run over as he always draws out his speech. Yeah, so they run over, they go longer, they last longer than planned, than scheduled, and it's because he draws them out. He draws out his speech. Okay, coming on to the next word, it's frisky. And yeah, my cat was frisky when I just went inside, actually. It's normally used for animals. If it's used for people, it might sound like they're sexually excited if you say that someone is frisky. But when it's an animal, when it's a cat, it's very often used with cats, this adjective, not really very often used with other animals. But when it's an animal, when it's a cat, it means that that cat's in the kind of mood where it's playing with something, where it wants to catch a mouse, it's running around, it's very energetic. I mean, a frisky cat is an energetic cat, and a cat that wants to catch a mouse or play with something. So my cat likes the children's bullets. The children have got little foam bullets from their guns that they fire at each other. They really hurt, actually, if they hit you in the face, and the kids usually cry if they get shot in the face. But these little foam bullets, the cats love them, and you just flick them around the room, and they're like dogs. They run and pick up, well, my cat runs, picks up the bullet in its mouth, and then runs back to me. It's like the game of fetch. So we would call that kind of behaviour frisky. He's in a frisky mood. It's more like a mood than a behaviour. Okay, to harp on about, you know, harp on about, drone on about, harp on about, go on about, rabbit on about, all of these, you know, all of these speaking words, they very often mean to nag if you're going on about something, but it can also mean to complain, to whine, to whinge, to grumble. And carp on about, and I would say certainly has this whinging or whining or complaining element. So I gave you the example, he's always carping on about his boss, but could be anything you're complaining about. He was carping on about how terrible the service was at the restaurant. Okay, get into. And if we say something like this, you don't know what you're getting into, it means the same as you don't know what you're letting yourself in for. Exactly the same as that phrasal verb, to let yourself in for something. When you say, you don't know what you're getting into, you don't know what you're letting yourself in for. And this whole sentence means you don't know the difficulties, the problems, the difficult situation that you've let yourself in for, that you've allowed to happen. And if you've got yourself into a difficult situation, of course, you're responsible for putting yourself in this position. So to get into or to let yourself in for means to put yourself in a difficult position, to put yourself in some kind of difficulty or problem, which is going to take your brains or your physical strength or your courage in order to get out. So get into can mean find yourself in a difficult situation, like let yourself in for. Okay, the next one is to prop up, and prop up is very physical firstly, although it can be used metaphorically. And I told you that I propped up these boards, in fact, there are no boards here, but there are boards over there which are holding the insulation, and I propped, in fact, the insulation just sticks there because it's a little bit fatter than the distance, but the distance between the two pieces of wood. But I propped up the board, which wasn't held up by anything. I needed to put in these little batons to hold them up, and I propped up the board with a piece of wood, with a long piece of wood. I just propped it up, so I stuck the piece of wood. It literally means support and hold upright, hold up like that. You can prop something up, but you can prop up the economy by increasing taxes. You can prop up the economy by printing more money. All of these are fiscal measures that are used to shore up the economy, to prop up the economy. So please remember that shore up can also be used like prop up, with economy, certainly. But I would never say shore up for the physical support. I'd never say I shored up that piece of wood. No, I propped up that piece of wood with, that board, that long board, I propped it up with a couple of pieces of wood so that I could then screw the screws in and make sure that it was held in place, that it was fully supported. So yeah, there's some good words there. Okay, to jazz up your flat, to do up your flat, they both mean to decorate. So we're doing up our house at the moment. I'm waiting for the builder who will come round on Wednesday. He's coming Wednesday morning, and we will discuss how exactly we will do up the flat, what kind of style we will do the bathroom out in, and yeah, what kind of work actually needs to be done. Okay, the next one is to land up in, or to end up in, because they're both the same. If you land up in a predicament, you land up in a difficult situation, you end up in a difficult situation. It just means finish with yourself in a certain position. So I gave you the example, he landed up in trouble with his wife, meaning he ended up having a problem, having some kind of trouble with his wife. So yeah, just to finish, to land up in, to end up in, to wind up in, I think you could say that as well. He wound up in a lot of trouble with his wife. All of those mean to finish in some kind of way in a situation. Quite often a difficult situation, a predicament, but not necessarily. You could say he landed up in, he ended up in, yeah, you could use a positive end, although it's very often with negative positions, but you could land up in a beautiful new house if you work hard, earn a lot of money, and then land up in a beautiful new house. It's what I would like to do. And 2018, I'm sure, is the year where I'm going to make a lot more money, and it will be the phrasal verb book, I'm sure. I will write that book one day. In fact, I'd like to start a lot more creative writing anyway, because I think it's quite fun. Okay, to be blown out of proportion. I think we very often use this as a set expression, to blow something out of all proportion, or to exaggerate would be the other simple, more formal expression, although exaggerate isn't very formal, it's neutral. But yeah, to blow something out of all proportion would be to make something usually much worse, or much more nervous, or much more scary, or something like that, much worse than it actually is. But you could do exaggerate positively as well. You could make something much nicer than it actually is. But I think it works very well with the example I've given, which is these rumours have been blown out of all proportion. Yeah, so these rumours have been exaggerated. They're not actually true. They don't bear any relation to reality. They have no bearing on reality. So they don't bear on reality. It's another good phrasal verb. So yeah, blow up can sometimes, these rumours have been blown up. You might sometimes use blow up, but no, most of the time, please try and use blow something out of all proportion. It sounds much better. Okay, to stand up to scrutiny. Remember that to stand up can mean to, if something stands up, if you say his alibi didn't stand up, it means exactly the same as his alibi didn't hold up. His alibi didn't bear, the evidence didn't bear out his alibi. Exactly the same as those two. So if his alibi doesn't stand up to scrutiny, it's exactly the same as his alibi didn't hold up. Yeah, we'll very often use this with the word scrutiny. Very often. The initial hypothesis doesn't stand up to scrutiny. The evidence doesn't bear out our initial hypothesis. Okay, so it's another one. I hadn't thought of that before, but it's another one which we should put with hold up and bear out. Remember that hold up is intransitive and bear out is transitive. Okay, to pick someone up on. To pick up on, sorry, to pick up on and not to pick someone up on something. To pick someone up on something is to call someone out on their mistakes. Yeah, it's my job to pick up students on their mistakes. Or to pick students up on their mistakes. Strange, that one would work on either side of the up. It's both sides of the up that someone can be placed. So it's my job to pick students up on their mistakes, or it's my job to pick up students on their mistakes. It's my job to call students out on their mistakes. So yeah, they're very, very similar, pick up on and call someone out on. But there is another meaning of to pick up on, and it's when you notice something and react to something you've noticed. Usually you react as well, but it means just notice. So if you say something like, he had a very slight French accent, but I didn't pick up on it. It means I didn't notice it. I didn't notice his accent at all, even though he did have a very slight accent. Maybe your friend told you about it afterwards and you thought, oh yeah, there was a slight little accent there, but I didn't pick up on it. I didn't notice it. So to pick up on something is to notice something, very often something subtle, and something subtle that you should have noticed but you didn't notice. Very often used in a negative, but you could use it in the positive as well. Okay, that puts us at the end of lesson feedback 30, so we'll carry on to 31. And the very first word on 31 is humility. So humility is a noun, and it's the noun which comes from the adjective humble. And so Jesus is very well known for being a very modest, a very humble person, and humility is the state of being humble. So I gave you the example here that being the laughing stock, being the joke of the town, teaches you humility. It teaches you not to be arrogant. It teaches you that you are actually not so important and that you shouldn't think of yourself as bigger or better than everybody else. So, I mean, humility is a very positive state, because it means that you are modest, that you are humble, that you don't think you are better than everybody else, but that you are willing to let other people go above you. You are willing to treat other people as your superior. So humility is a good word, kind of the opposite to arrogance, I would say. Okay, to stir something up. Remember the word shit stirrer, yeah? I remember telling you about a shit stirrer, somebody who likes to wind two people up so that they start fighting. Yeah, a little bit like the way you say play someone off against another person, you mean that you make them compete. But this one is much more like make them fight. When you get two people to start fighting, you stir up trouble. And so stir up works particularly well with trouble. Stir up trouble, stir up... you wouldn't say stir up a fight usually. You'd normally say stir up trouble, so it collocates quite strictly with trouble. But there are probably some other words. I don't know if anything's going to crop up. If I put it, if I type it out on my screen, stir up. We'll see what Merriam-Webster comes up with. Oh, good point. Yeah, okay, yeah, I should say this as well. Stir up, you can stir up emotions as well. You don't just stir up trouble. Stir up trouble means stir up a problem, and I think that's very often used like that. Stir up trouble, stir up racial hatred is another example they give. His critical comments certainly stirred things up is another good example with stir up. But you can also stir up emotions, and it means elicit emotions, call forth emotions, draw emotions out of your listeners or your readers or whatever. So a lot of good literature will stir up emotions. A good horror story will stir up fear. A good a good love story will stir up romance, yeah, or something like that, or stir up your feelings of love for different characters. So yes, stir up can also be stir up a strong emotion or a desire to do something, but very common to see it with negative things like trouble, racial hatred, that kind of thing. Okay, To gobble up. We've done this recently. Gobble up, eat up, finish up. When you gobble something up, you eat it very quickly, and it sounds like you ate a lot of it as well. When you eat something up, you completely finish it. When you finish up your dinner, you completely finish it as well. Finish up is not so common, it seems to me. Eat up is much more common. The next one is to shore up, and it's used financially. As I just said, it means the same as prop up, support. But you can say they tried to shore up the economy with fiscal measures. I forgot to write fiscal measures on your feedback, sorry about that. And the next word is to prop up an administration. The government was propped up, was supported with the help of foreign investment. So it's another good example of how we can use prop up, but remember that you can use it very physically, this one. Okay, to add up, none of these facts add up. They are anomalous. None of these facts make sense. Yeah, none of these facts are compatible. All these facts are incompatible, so they don't add up. And that's what you say that's what you mean when you say none of this adds up. It means none of this makes any sense. None of this is logical. None of this is rational. None of these facts are compatible. None of these facts add up. Yeah, and so it means they don't make sense. But there is another meaning of add up. I'm trying to think of it now. Add up to. It can mean imply also. If you say all of these facts or all of this evidence adds up to... I'm just going to have to look for it, Otto, otherwise I'm a bit worried I might get this one a tad wrong. So it can mean add up to a total amount, certainly. If separate amounts add up to a total amount, then they form a lump sum, yeah? And add up to something to combine to produce a particular result or effect. These new measures do not add up to genuine reform. Well, I would say it means mean here. These new measures do not mean genuine reform. They don't add up to, they don't imply genuine reform. They don't mean that there's actually been reforms that have happened. So to add up to can also mean or imply. So you might say all of the clues that Sherlock collected, none of those clues added up to a woman being the killer. Yeah, none of these facts added up to. It could be used like that. I don't like it though. Let me see if I can find another example of add up to from Cambridge now. To have a particular result or effect, they say as well, just like Macmillan. So it all added up to a lot of hard work for all of us. It all meant a lot of hard work for all of us. It all implied, it all led to. Their proposals do not add up to any real help for the poor. Their proposals do not lead to any real help for the poor. So it could be, you could think of it like lead to as well, or mean or imply. Okay, let's keep going. It's quite a hard one, that one, add up to. To drag on. I think most of the TV shows in the United States drag on too long. They really do. Look at Sherlock. It's a great show for vocabulary, but they've got hundreds and hundreds of episodes. The show drags on way too long. They have dragged it out to 5 seasons now, and every season has 28 episodes, and so never forget, drag on, drag out, draw on, draw out. We've repeated them too many times. I won't forgive you if you forget either of those or any of those, because there are 4 of them. Okay, again, we've got to land up in, to end up in. It means to finish at the end of a long process in a certain situation, usually a predicament. So we went on a long journey and ended up in serious trouble. Yeah, we went out to Thailand and went on a long walk and ended up in the middle of the jungle, lost, something like that. To jut out, I've told you before that the wood in my shed juts out at the edges, and it juts out much less than it should have done, than it would have done if I had followed the plans. But I cut my overhang, the overhang that comes out off the front of the shed. I cut it back. I cut it at least 1 metre further back than it would have been, and used the extra wood to make a nice bit of decking, and I think I did a good job as well. But it still juts out, and still when I go round the sides, which I don't do very often because it's just a little bit of space on each side and then my neighbours behind me, But if I go down the side, I very often bang my head on the part which juts out. Okay, to hurry something along, or to hurry someone up, and you can hurry someone along as well. Could you hurry him along? He's taking ages, yeah, something like that. Or we need to hurry the project along. Yeah, we need to make it go faster. We need to make it finish much faster. Otherwise, we're going to miss the deadline, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think hurry up and hurry along are quite easy. The hype is also known as the build-up. So the hype before the Olympics is the build-up, where they're putting it all on, they're promoting it on TV and on the radio and on the internet. They're hyping it up. They're building it up. You can even say they're hyping it up. So they're building it up. They're getting everybody as interested as possible. And all marketing companies and advertising companies, they have to hype up the product. They have to build up the product in the mind of the potential customer, because they have to sell the product, and if they want to sell as much as possible, or as many items as possible, they need to make the product look sexy. Yeah, they need to sell that product. They need to sex it up. They need to jazz it up. They need to build it up. They need to hype it up. All of those are possible. I mean, build it up in the mind of the consumer. Hype it up in the mind of the consumer, so that the consumer thinks that they can't afford not to have this item. They've got to have it, yeah? Okay, the next one, to dry up. Now, I remember telling you that anything which flows can dry up. So a person's speech, we think of speech coming out of someone's mouth as flowing out of someone's mouth. Words flow out of someone's mouth, and for that reason, a person can dry up in the middle of their speech, and it means the same as clam up, or something very similar. I think we said that clam up was normally due to shyness or nervousness, whereas dry up doesn't have to be. Yeah, clam up, embarrassed or nervousness. Now let's try dry up in Cambridge, see what they say. They don't give as much information as me. This is why I need to write the book. They talk about flows of money drying up, which is also true. A river can dry up because it flows. A flow of money can dry up because it flows. Yeah, funding can dry up, but a flow of words out of your mouth can also dry up. I mean, and we don't say the words dry up, we just say you dry up, and it means that you suddenly can't speak, you know, perhaps because you're feeling nervous. I want to find one which actually says the dry up meaning where you stop talking, because it's definitely there. Yeah, it comes straight up, cease talking. Then he dried up. Phil couldn't get another word out of him. So maybe that's not from shyness or nervousness. This is the point. Clam up sounds nervous and shy. Dry up doesn't have to, although it is also very often used for when somebody is shy or nervous and they stop talking. But someone can dry up for many other reasons as well. So you might dry up in the middle of your speech because you forget your words, something like that, and you just dry up. The words stop coming out of your mouth. I think you remember the example, your balls dry up. Yeah, when you get married, your balls dry up. It's not true for me, certainly not. And I think it's important to make sure that your balls never dry up. As your brother says, actually it's a vital function of the body. And if your balls dry up, you want to be a little bit worried about your health, your men's health. So certainly, yeah, it's a good idea if the flow of spunk doesn't dry up. Yeah, because spunk flows, because sperm or spunk is quite often used in England, though it's rude, because it dries up, because it flows, it can dry up. Your nuts can dry up, certainly. Okay, to get on, it can mean to get older. If you say he's getting on a bit, it means he's really getting quite old, and I think we very often put a bit on the end of that one. Not sure why, but we very often do. So if you say how are you getting on, it means how are you making progress, how are you doing, how are you getting on at school, how are you getting on at work. It does have that other meaning how are you progressing at school, how is the process going, how are you getting on at work, how are you getting on at school, how are you getting on with your latest project, how are you getting on with your homework. It can also be used like that. Get on a bus, get off a bus, get on public transport, get off public transport. Get on with someone as well when you have a good relationship with someone, or get along with, the Americans quite often use. I don't think there are any more for get on, but there must be, and so maybe you can tell me in the next lesson if I've forgotten any for get on, because I'm sure there must be. Okay, to pull your socks up. If you decide that you need to pull your socks up, this is an idiom, and it means to, let me make sure I get this one right, to start work, to knuckle down, to buckle down and start working much harder on some particular project, much more seriously on some particular project. The dictionary, the online dictionary, says make an effort to improve one's work. So yeah, you start knuckling down, you start buckling down, you're making a lot of effort to improve your work. So yeah, a bit like knuckle down or buckle down. Next one is to set aside or to set apart, and you can set aside time or you can set aside money. So we set apart some extra time for another lesson. This is much like put aside. You can put aside time. We put aside some extra time for another lesson, or we put aside some money for the future. We set aside some money for the future. Or we set by some money for the future. We put by some money for the future. So set aside, set apart, put aside, not really put apart, put by, set by, they all mean to, well, put by is only used for money and set by is only used for money. You don't normally set by time. You set aside or put aside time or money, but you put by or set by only money. So they're all worth remembering together because they all have a relationship, they all share things in common, and it helps us build this web that we're building at the moment of vocabulary in our minds, which is the best place to have it, and not on feedbacks, of course. But I certainly feel like my phrasal verbs are improving. They really are. I've got a lot now in my head of lists of various phrasal verbs and synonymous phrasal verbs and their relationships to other transitive, intransitive phrasal verbs. It's yeah, I've certainly brushed up on my phrasal verbs, and I feel like I've soaked up a lot over the last year or so of lessons. So if you hold something off, or put something off, or hold back something, or put back something, or set back something, or hold up something, it means delay, it means postpone. All of those can mean postpone in one way or another, so they're all worth remembering together. Let's hold off the lesson for another day. Let's hold off on, I think you can hold off on doing something as well. Let's hold off on finishing the project until, oh dear, the cat's come to annoy me now. Let's just check hold off on. It means delay, I'm sure. Hold off on is in Merriam-Webster. To decide that something will happen at a later time. To postpone. She decided to hold off on her vacation for a while longer. He held off on announcing the decision. So remember, hold off on plus object, or just hold off. Let's hold off. Well, hold off can have an object. Let's hold off the lesson for another day. But I think we often do put an on in there if there's an object. And if there's no object, we just say hold off very often. So let's hold off on the lesson for another day. Let's put off the lesson for another day. Let's hold back. You don't normally say hold back meaning postpone, but maybe there is one way that I'm forgetting. Sorry, the cat's decided to come in. You sit there, cat. You sit down there. That's it. It's warm. You just hear. Yeah, oh, I touched my screen as well, so it's gone down. That's better. Yeah, I'm not so sure about hold back being postpone. Being honest, I'm not completely sure that's right. Hold back. Let's see what Merriam-Webster says. It's the act of retaining or restraining something. Yeah, they don't have anything for postpone for hold back. Ah, another one, sorry. To hinder the progress or achievement of. Well, that's certainly true, but that's not postpone. Yeah, I would like to retract hold back from delay, because I don't think it is. You can say that something has delayed you, something has held you back, meaning hindered your progress, but you can't say let's hold back the lesson, let's delay the lesson, let's put off the lesson. That's not possible. Okay, so there is a difference between hold back and hold off on or put off. You can put back the lesson 1 week, you can set the lesson back 1 week and hold up. No, you can't really hold up the lesson either. I don't like hold back, and I don't like hold... Well, hold back is, you know, it's hindering your progress. You might say that his poor mathematical knowledge is holding him back in maths lessons, something like that. But yeah, let's check the other one. So hold back is used differently than put off, certainly. Let's quickly check the other one as well. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. There it is. And hold up. Again, if something holds you up, it hinders your progress. It's different from let's put off the lesson to another week or something like that. It's very different. So they are different. There's I would say that hold back and hold up are similar because they both mean hinder progress, whereas hold off on or put off mean delay something on your schedule. So there is a difference there. I hope that's very clear to you. There is a difference because I don't think I made that clear in that particular lesson. And I know that you like to know all of the subtle nuances, and so here is a subtle nuance. Hold up and hold back mean hinder progress. Hold off, put back, set back mean delay something on your schedule. Okay, to declare or wage war on. This is a pretty... it's not very flexible, this phrase. It comes all together. So to declare war on or to wage war on. Wage war on sounds quite classical to me, although it's still very regularly used. It's not rare or too formal, it's very regular. It will often be in newspapers. But I feel like wage war goes right back to classical sources, or I feel like the language is certainly the kind of language you would find if you were reading about the Battle of Troy or something like that. This wage war, and it even sounds Latin to me, although it probably isn't. I'm probably completely wrong. But yeah, wage war on or declare war on. Okay, if you piss something away, I told you that my dad was always worried about me pissing away all my money. Yeah, it means fritter away or idle away, but piss something away usually means fritter it away on booze, on alcohol. So spend all that money, waste all that money on booze or alcohol. But if you fritter something away, then you waste it. And so you can fritter away your free time, I don't know, watching crap TV, or you can fritter away your free time doing something, you know, something which is just a waste of time. Yeah, something which is not practical or very it doesn't help you in any kind of way, and I think we all like to fritter away Sunday afternoons. Here, be careful, because there are a couple of other ones. There's idle away, which to me sounds like you're being lazy on that day. That idle means lazy, so if you spend your hour, if you idle away the hours, you waste them being lazy, doing absolutely nothing, just pottering about and doing nothing. But while away the hours sounds like you're spending them in a very relaxing way. Let's see what Merriam-Webster say for while away. If you while away the hours, you spend them in a very relaxing way, doing something pleasant and easy. So we whiled away the afternoon with a walk around the garden. That's lovely, yeah, we whiled it. It's not necessarily wasted with while away, because it's pleasant, it's nice, but it's not hard. There's no difficulty there, it's something easy. So you could while away the afternoon doing anything easy. It can't be hard work. You while away the afternoon, I don't know, reading poetry, or you while away the afternoon, I don't know, playing chess with your friend. Yeah, it's not difficult, it's just relaxing. While away is very relaxing, and it means spend the time in a relaxing way. Very often that free time which you have. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so remember, fritter away, waste, and idle away. Be lazy as well with that piss something away and while away. To be spot on means to be exactly right. And if you say spot on, it means you are exactly right. You're absolutely, exactly, precisely correct. If you say he tried to guess my age and he was spot on. Yeah, he said, I think you're about 38. I say, spot on, you're exactly right. Okay, right on. Right on, you say when you agree with someone, you say, right on. Yeah, I agree, absolutely, right on. Let's see what Merriam-Webster say about that one. Right on. Often used interjectionally, it's an interjection, to express agreement. Exactly correct. You're spot on. Right on. Yeah, and that's all I've got there. So they've got a couple of examples. Her assessment of the situation was right on. You can also say bang on, by the way. Nowadays, you can say it was bang on, it was spot on, it was right on, meaning exactly correct. It hit the target. It was absolutely right, precisely correct. Okay, that's a good one. I like that one. We'll go on to number 32 now. I think we've got to save changes because I changed something there, but on to 32. First word is set apart. Now this is different from what I said earlier when you set some time apart, although I think that one's very rare. It's normally set time aside. Normally set time aside or set money aside, not normally set apart. Set apart means distinguish. Yes, distinguish. So his passion for the subject sets him apart from the other students. Yeah, it means his passion distinguishes him. It makes him stand out from the crowd. It makes him, it shows that he is different. It's the most obvious defining factor that he's different. And here you might want to remember as well, tell apart. Because if you can tell two things apart, you can see the difference. And we say about twins very often, can your mum and dad tell you apart? Can your mum and dad see the difference? Yeah? Or do they constantly mix you up? Yeah, because you look so similar as twins. So to tell two people apart is related to the verb to set apart. If something sets you apart from the others, it makes you stand out from the crowd. It distinguishes you. Very often it's a positive quality, but it could be a negative quality as well. But it shows that you are different from everybody else because of this quality. And when you can tell two people apart, you can see the difference. You can see what it is that makes the two twins look different. And so when I was young, the way to tell me and my brother apart was to look at the face, and you could see that my face was slightly chubbier, slightly rounder, and my nose is certainly rounder than my brother's nose, which is more pointy. It's sharper, and he has sharper features. I would say he has a sharper chin as well, and thinner cheeks. So I would say that's the best way, that was the best way to tell us apart. Nowadays it's easy to tell us apart because my brother's a maths teacher, but he's got very long hair like a hippie, hair down to around there, and so it's really easy to tell us apart. We just look at the hair and it's obvious. Okay, to set aside time and money. Yeah, so don't use set apart with time or money, or I wouldn't, I never have. I set aside time and money. I set aside some free time every week to learn Russian, and I've done that this year. I've set aside some free time to learn Russian. And I'm setting aside, I want to set aside some more free time to do some work in the house. I'm even thinking about cancelling football on Mondays. I would like to, but I feel like I'll let the team down, and so I kind of feel like I can't. But I will cancel more often this year, because I remember that last year my friend Paul only went to about 40% of the games, and I went to 90%, so I was a lot more reliable. You could depend on me, you could rely on me, certainly. Okay, the next two are set by and put by, which are both only money, not time now. I set by a little time. Well, you might see set by with time. You might see set by with time as well. I don't want to say you never will. You might. But personally, I like set aside for time or money, and set by and put by I think is more common with money. Okay, to be spaced out or to zone out means to very often look like you're on drugs or something like that. Spaced out certainly means it comes from the 60s, and if somebody was spaced out, then they were stoned or something like that. They've been smoking marijuana or something like that, and then they feel spaced out. Or they zone out, which kind of means start to look catatonic. Yeah, start to look like just hypnotized or something like that, under hypnosis or in a trance. When you zone out, you look like you're in a trance. Okay, to eke out, excellent phrasal verb here. Please remember this one. If you try to eke something out, you try to draw it out. It's very similar to drag something out or draw something out. You remember how you drag out a meeting, you make it last as long as possible. You draw out a meeting, you make it last as long as possible. If you eke out your food supplies, you're trying to make food supplies last as long as possible. And so the difference between draw or drag out, draw and drag out is when you try to make a process, very often a speech, but it could be a meeting, it could be anything. When you try to make a process as long as possible, when you try and eke something out, you try and make the supply of something as long as possible. And so if you are isolated in the middle of nowhere and you have very, very few supplies, maybe you're in the military and you need to hold out for another 6 weeks in this particular place. Maybe you're under siege, there's no supplies coming in or going out, you're under siege and you need to hold out for at least 6 weeks when you'll get some kind of support, maybe some military support, maybe some reinforcements. And so what you decide to do is to eke out all of your supplies. You want to draw them out for as long as possible, and so you eke out those supplies so that they last as many weeks as possible. So that you don't suddenly, so that when you're holed up, yeah, I'm giving you a situation where you're holed up, you've barricaded yourself in, you've holed yourself up, and the enemy are trying to flush you out, and so you decide to eke out all of your supplies. You'll eke out your ammunition even, because you don't want to run out of bullets, yeah? If you run out of bullets, everything's over. You can surrender, or you'll have to surrender, you'll have to give up. But you decide to eke out ammunition supplies to make sure you can stay holed up, you can stay barricaded in, you can hold out for much longer when you eke out supplies. So eke out supplies, but draw out or drag out processes. There's a slight difference there. It's a very slight nuance, but I think I've managed to clearly explain that difference. I'm quite happy with the way I have set those two phrasal verbs apart. Yes. Okay, to space out. Well, we just did space out, didn't we? To space out, let's space... Ah, no, sorry, a different kind of space out. Okay, you could say let's space out the lessons and only have one a week. Yeah? That would mean just space them out, let's have more time between each and every lesson. That's what space out means here. So if you space out things physically, that would mean put more distance between each and every object which is perhaps lying in a row. So maybe you work in road maintenance and you have some cones and you put the cones out along the road, and then your boss says, no, we don't have so many cones, you need to eke those cones out, and to do so you need to space them out. Okay, you need to increase the distance between each and every cone and space them out. And if you do that, you'll be able to eke out our supply of cones. Yeah, you could even use eke out here. Okay, to drag out or draw out or spin out, we're getting them again. If you forget these ones, I'll get angry because we've done them so many times now. We keep doing them over and over again. Yeah, to do something over and over again. We keep doing these phrasal verbs over and over again, and I'm absolutely certain that you're going to learn all of these phrasal verbs and that you'll enjoy using them as well next time you go to Canada or the States or something like that, because it is fun using these words and it certainly makes you look a lot more natural as well. So yeah, drag out, draw out and spin out. I don't like spin out, but drag out and draw out means to make a process longer. Trickle down, use this for any liquid or fluid which is moving down a surface, but it can even be used metaphorically, and I'll explain how in a moment. But rain trickles down the window, tears trickle down your cheek. But you can even use it metaphorically, and the example I gave you was, I think that very little money trickles down to the worthy causes when we give to charity, unfortunately. I think very little money trickles down to the place where it's needed. So you can really use it with anything that flows. Again, just like dry up, anything that flows can dry up. Well, anything that flows, liquids, water, can trickle down, and for that reason you can use it for funding, because money flows and money can trickle down to the poor, or it doesn't have to. And I remember in House of Cards, Frank said, I want to coin the phrase trickle-down diplomacy. And he wasn't actually coining the phrase, because to coin the phrase means to create a new phrase which everyone's going to know and everyone's going to use like a slogan or something like that. But he didn't coin the phrase. He stole it from someone else, as far as I remember. Trickle-down diplomacy was actually from Reagan or something like that. And so trickle-down diplomacy means diplomacy which is trickling down to the bottom. Okay? So you can talk about the river trickling down the hill or something like that. It's for anything that flows can trickle down, including money. Okay, blatant means obvious to everybody. Absolutely obvious and clear and easily visible. So if I say it was a blatant foul, and so the the referee gave him a red card. Don't need two coordinating conjunctions, do we? Just one is enough. So it was a blatant foul. So the referee gave him a red card. Blatant just here means obvious. And I think blatant we very often use with negative nouns to say that something negative happened and it was obvious. So we often say a blatant lie, a blatant foul, a blatant attack on my character, something like that, or a blatant, it's very often used with negative words. Let me quickly put it into Merriam-Webster and see what Merriam-Webster say about blatant. Noisy, especially in a vulgar or offensive manner. It doesn't normally mean noisy. I disagree with Merriam-Webster there. I've never heard it. You never say, oh, the music was... I mean, noise, something is noisy, it's blatant, because everybody can hear it, so it's obvious. But yeah, I prefer their meaning number 2. I think it should be meaning number 1, really. Completely obvious, conspicuous, or obtrusive, especially in a crass or offensive manner. Notice the negativity there. So the man had a blatant disregard for the rules, yeah, something like that. He flagrantly... he flagrantly ignored the rules. There was a better expression than that. A flagrant violation of the law is flagrant here is similar to blatant. Very, very similar word. Let's see what flagrant comes up with. Conspicuously offensive. Yeah, so flagrant errors, blatant errors. Another one is flagrant violations of human rights. Blatant violation of human rights. Yeah, so flagrant and blatant are the same. If you talk about flagrant errors, you mean blatant errors. So worth remembering those two together. Lenient means not strict, not severe, not harsh. It's the opposite of severe and harsh. So you can have a severe punishment, a harsh punishment, or maybe you get away with it and the judge gives you a lenient punishment. So remember the phrasal verb get away with for leniency, because if somebody gives you a lenient punishment, really you get away with it. So yeah, lenient is the opposite of severe or strict, and it's very useful in law. Okay, if you put something down to something else, it means you ascribe a cause to that something. So Holmes put the cause of death down to an epinephrine injection. Yeah, he considered the cause of death to be due to the epinephrine injection, to be caused by the epinephrine injection. Okay, and remember come down to, boil down to, because they're like put something down to, but there's no agent in this. You don't put the cause down to something, you just say the cause comes down to, yeah, the cause of death comes down to an epinephrine injection. Okay, and a lab coat is simply one of those white jackets that you wear in a laboratory. I've got one. It's too small for me, but I've got one because I like experiments and I like to pretend I'm a scientist. It's like a hobby, and I just like to understand how processes work around me, how the world works. I think everybody likes to understand how the world works, and it is from an almost philosophical perspective, really, but I like to think that science is very philosophical, although there is a difference between the two. Okay, we're on to lesson feedbacks 33 now, I think. Hold on. Yep, on to lesson feedbacks 33. And the very first one is a crib sheet. Now, a crib sheet or a cheat sheet is a little piece of paper that you use to check the answers. I know the word here, I use the word in Russian much more often than I do the English word. The Russian word is shpagalka. and it's a word which I never used a crib sheet or a cheat sheet at school. I never did, and it's because I was actually rather afraid of getting 0 in the test. And I remember that our teachers were quite harsh and strict about tests, and they would walk around the exam hall, and if they saw anybody looking on their arm where they'd written some answers, they would pick up the test, screw it up, or what's the word for it? Roll it up into a ball. I can't think of a good word there. That's strange, isn't it, for kind of when you do this, when you... I can't think of a good word for it, but there must be a phrasal verb. Screw it up, maybe. Screw up a piece of paper into a ball and just throw it in the bin and say thank you for attempting the exam, but you failed. They were really strict. And I remember when I went to Russia, I was shocked because the teachers let all the children cheat in every single exam or test they ever did. They let them cheat, and they would even whisper the answers into their ears, and I'd never seen anything like it, and I was really surprised, really shocked. And it made me understand that communism, because I blame communism for this attitude, for this behaviour, communism breeds corruption at the very bottom levels, right at the bottom. And it was because you're kind of in a team when you're in a communist country, you're all in it together, everybody's equal and you're all in it together. It means that the teachers will quite often help you cheat and things like that. And yeah, it's corruption, but it's corruption right at the bottom level. And so I think that, yeah, communism does breed a lot of corruption, because I hadn't seen anything like it. And their whole education system is rather corrupt, even though they had a very strong mathematical system in the past, really strong in mathematics. That still, there's such a lot of cheating that goes on, and so many people get their place at university, even though they're rubbish at the subject, simply because they managed to cheat in some kind of way. Okay, in my humble opinion, I think Sherlock very often says, in my not so humble opinion, yeah, in my less than humble opinion, meaning in my arrogant opinion. So humble means humility, yeah, we said humility earlier, and it means the state of being modest, being humble. If you're humble, you're modest. I remember I met a very rich Russian guy, and I really liked him because he was incredibly polite and incredibly humble. The very first time I met him, and not all Russians are like this by any means, you know, a lot of rich Russians are incredibly arrogant, but this guy struck me as incredibly intelligent. And I remember the very first time I met him, he bowed like a Japanese man does. He bowed to me and said, "It's really nice to meet you," and was very enthusiastic and asked to have some lessons. But that's the first time I have ever been bowed to. It's never happened again, and that could be considered very humble and modest behaviour. Okay, to connect to means to, if you connect your phone to the socket, then you plug it in. So it could mean like that, but we'd normally say plug in for that. But if you connect the computer to the phone, yeah, you have a wire which joins the computer to the phone. So join to, connect to, similar to plug in. To connect with, this would be more non-literal. I think that this one is very often used for metaphorical. So these phrasal verbs are all connected with cause and effect. Cause and effect are intangible. Phrasal verbs are intangible. Connect with, it seems to me, is better for intangible stuff. Or you can connect with someone, especially in the States. They might say, I connected with an old friend. We would say, I hooked up with an old friend. Sounds much better to me. Yeah, or I got in touch with, or I made contact with. Don't often say connect with, in fact, with people. I connected with him. It doesn't sound so good. Best for intangible nouns. So the bad weather is connected with the... No, even then I would say connected to. It's connected. These phrasal verbs are all connected to cause and effect. Personally, I like connect to. I think in America they use connect with, and in Britain we very often use connect to. In the same way, in Britain we always say talk to, speak to, and in America they say talk with, speak with. So I think it's connected to that. And yeah, connect to is British English, connect with I think is American English. Okay, to tackle means to deal with a certain kind of problem. When you tackle a problem or you tackle something that's difficult, you deal with it. You try and find a solution to the problem. Yeah, you come up against the problem and you deal with it. So yeah, to tackle a problem, it means to actually deal with a problem. Okay, to add up, it can mean make sense, but it can also mean result in and lead to. As I said earlier, I'm glad that these explanations seem to be adding up, yeah, making sense. So his explanation doesn't add up means that it doesn't make sense. It's incoherent, it's incompatible. Maybe his alibi doesn't add up, and it's because his alibi isn't holding up. His alibi isn't standing up to scrutiny. Yeah, you could use it very similar to that then, add up, stand up to scrutiny. But also, add up to means to result in or lead to. So you could say all of his, the fact that the victims, no, let me give you a good example for add up to meaning result in. I'm going to try Merriam-Webster this time. Just good to get to grips with these difficult phrasal verbs, because it's very hard sometimes to see exactly what they mean. So let's have a look. Hold on. They don't have much on Merriam-Webster here. Add up to much. They're just giving me. They're not giving me add up to. We're going to have to try something else then for add up to. A different dictionary, I mean. We'll try Longman this time. Add up to something. Yeah, to produce a particular total or result. So I don't like those examples. So these new measures do not add up to genuine reform. It means, yeah, that they don't lead to genuine reform. But the fact that he was, so he's been working harder, he's been training harder, and all of this adds up to a better performance in the next match. Something like that, simple as that. So it can mean result in or lead to. Okay, the next one is to stem from, which means to be caused by, to be rooted in. So the problem stems from long-term neglect. The problem is rooted in long-term neglect. Okay, to be propped up by, to be supported by. So Brazilian society is propped up by the middle class. I think that's very often the case, actually, in all countries. The middle class tends to prop up society, and certainly to prop up the economy. Okay, to overcome. It means to manage to triumph over obstacles, hindrances, problems. So we all have difficulties, problems and predicaments that we need to overcome. And we all have certain emotions as well. It's very good to say that you overcome your emotions. We all have certain emotions which are hard to hold back, but if we do manage to restrain them, if we do manage to hold them back, we very often overcome these emotions, especially if we get used to holding them back. And I think over time, when you hold back an emotion, the emotion weakens, and in the end you triumph over that emotion. I remember being very influenced when I was younger by the idea that you do have the choice to change your personality, to actually change your emotional makeup if you pay attention to yourself and act rationally and attempt to overcome certain negative emotions that you have. I believe it's possible to actually change your personality. You know, I think that, for example, someone who is very often jealous, if they don't want to get jealous, they can focus on that element of their personality and they can manage to overcome it by holding back that emotion at the right times and finding a substitute for that emotion, something that can take over from that emotion. And I think that we can actually, like gardeners, we can prune the plants and vegetation of our mind, and we can make sure that we have only positive emotions, or emotions that we consider good and joyful emotions and get rid of those negative emotions. But it's hard, of course. It's almost impossible because it's very difficult to overcome one's own emotions. They're very powerful things, emotions. But sometimes we just need to bottle them up, and I don't think there's anything negative with bottling up emotions. I think that it needs to be done sometimes. If you just always vent your emotions or vent them out, then you're being no different from a child. A child is a very emotional creature. A child doesn't know how to restrain any of their emotions, and I would say this is the fundamental difference. It's what sets adults apart from children. And it's why we shouldn't lump children in with adults, because they're very, very different emotionally. Okay, one more we'll quickly do. To be drenched, to be soaked, it means to be absolutely sopping wet. Really, 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 really wet. And I said sopping wet there. I'm going to check that I can say that, because it feels like I can say that. Sopping wet. Yeah, it's drenched, soaked, sopping wet. It is a word, I'm glad. So you can use that one if you go out and it's really heavy rain. You can say, I got sopping wet when I went out. Okay, we're going to have to hold it there. I think that's a lot of phrasal verbs that we've done for today. We're on phrasal verb feedback, or just lesson feedback 33, and we have got up to drenched and soaked. Next time we will start on profusely, which is a lovely adverb which is quite easy to use as well. Okay, so I'll see you on Friday. If I get any more time this week, I might make another one, and it will be for next week or something like that. I want to thank you again, because I'm really starting to get to grips with these phrasal verbs, and I feel like it's really helping my English. So it's great to just focus on vocabulary for a change and not do any grammar, and just literally focus on building that vocabulary base. Okay, I'll see you on Friday. I hope that was all clear and of benefit to you. See you soon.